Welcome to another episode of Mindful City, Tuning into Life, a podcast that brings you an intimate exploration of the businesses, practitioners, and artists making an impact in our community. Welcome to another episode of Mindful Cities, Tuning into Life. I'm your host, Helen Blocker, and we have our co-host, Heather Grutzmacher, here with us today. And we'd like to welcome our special guest today, Bryan May.
Hello.
And welcome, Bryan. I actually was introduced to you by actually Heather has been talking to you for about you to me for a while. And Heather has mentioned you as a brother, and I never knew that it wasn't actually a physical brother. So
Yeah.
all this time, I thought for sure you were related. And just briefly meeting you before we started this recording, I can definitely see why. Having a male presence in our life that has a spiritual tone that offers what Heather calls safety and security in that connection is something that I can speak for myself. I don't know if every female has the same experience, but there's not many that we have encountered that we get to have this. So I'm really looking forward to diving into this conversation with you, especially with your experience in coaching and consulting and guiding people through, upheaval or distress or whatever it is that's going on to their life, in their life, not even comparing what kind of distress it is. And you're in this space of guiding them through to the other side. So welcome to the show.
Hello. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. Thank you for Heather for making this beautiful connection. And
Yes,
I've
thank you,
also
Heather.
read up about you and listened to some of your old podcasts and stuff like that. So I'm very excited to be here. Thank you.
That's wonderful. Honestly, I find sometimes that the guests that come on the podcast are sometimes a real glimpse of my life in general. You find the right person comes to the show at the right time. And really, some of these questions are personal to me. They're things that I want to know. How do you do it? How have you gotten
Absolutely.
to where you are? And can you tell us how we can get there? And,
Totally.
one of the first things that I wanted to ask you when it comes to, the name of our place is Mindful City and our show is Tuning into Life. And I'm finding that difficult when it comes to business and mindfulness,
Hmm.
right? We want to promote mindful businesses, but what does that really mean? What does that look like? And how can you be? Because there's such a stigma about the desire for money and making us feel that that's not a mindful practice. What are your thoughts on that?
So much. And we just started. I don't even know. We didn't even start yet. And it's so much. So, first of all, I don't look at it like there's a finish line, right? Like a lot of the ways that you were speaking about it, it's like, okay, we're going to reach this top of this mountain. And there's just different levels to the game. Different people have different things. I look at it more like volume control, right, than an on and off switch, right?
Mhm.
So I think that's a one challenge right there, right? So when you think that someone has finished the race and there's this top of the mountain, it causes more stress than it's worth because there is no end. The end is really just death, right? There's no end to this thing. So, it's like even when you talk about money, is $100,000 a year a lot of money? Is $100,000 a month a lot of money? Is $100,000 a day a lot of money? I mean, there's levels to the game. So I think it's all like that. And then as far as like tuning into life, I love that name that you have,
Thank
right?
you.
Because it speaks about vibration, it speaks about energy. And the other thing is very important, define words and don't be afraid to look them up on Google because we're
Yes.
all running around using words that we don't know how to spell. We don't know the origin. We don't know so many things, but we're just like so used to using them. And so, like, not only look up what it means, but look up the origin. Because I'm
Mhm.
sure there's phrases, now that I said this, who's ever listening, I'm sure there are phrases that you use that you don't know where they're coming from. And there's phrases that you hear on TV and movies that you're like, you get the idea, right?
Mhm.
But where did it come from? So that's when you can kind of dissect stuff.
I think that's also where the stigma comes in because this is someone else telling us what the word means. And then we
Right.
start disliking the word and creating feelings and emotions even around the world, making the word and making decisions. Yes or no, that's something I can or cannot do. What's your own journey into spirituality? And then how did you then turn that into being able to navigate the world around you in terms of business, finances, securing a life in general?
Sure. Yeah. And it's interesting when you said before I answer, you were saying, a lot of people talk about limiting beliefs, but a
Mhm,
lot of people don't talk about limiting ideas. And
mhm.
so when you hear something and you grasp onto it, it's a limiting idea because you're going based on what they're saying. And I think that a lot of people are looking like for good or bad. But there's a lot of
Right.
people that aren't malicious at all. There's a lot of people that actually want you to succeed, want to support you. That doesn't mean the information they're giving you is correct,
Mhm,
right?
mhm, mhm.
So that's something else. I feel like limiting ideas is maybe even worse than limiting beliefs sometimes. Um,
Yes.
and as far as the journey, it's been a long one, no doubt. I'm turning 45 this summer, which is pretty absurd, and we're getting there. We're getting there. So I started in New York. I lived in New York my whole life and a lot of business, real estate, flipping houses, rentals, some stuff on Wall Street. And I had a crazy tragedy that happened to me. I had something really, really crazy where my wife passed away. And I was
Sorry.
basically a single father overnight. And I moved to Florida and it was a very existential, very crazy kind of thing. Like if you remember the old movie Sliding Doors, it was like this multiverse kind of opened up that I never thought
Hmm.
of. And I think that that's where a lot of people actually struggle, where you in your mind you're like you have this plan of what's going to happen. And
Yes.
then when that whole thing gets wiped out and then you wake up, it's almost like in LA right now with all these fires. When you wake
Yeah.
up, there's no house. It's like it's a shock to the system.
Yeah.
And so
Don't
it's
know where to
not
start. You don't even know what to think or where to pick up the pieces.
exactly.
Mm,
Exactly. And so that's what I started doing. I started slowly picking up the pieces. Uh, it really helped that I had my son. He was very young at the time.
mm,
And so he wasn't like in a depression. He wasn't in bed with the lights off, right? He was
yeah.
a kid wanting to have fun. And so
Yeah.
I would take him to the beach, I would take him to the pool, and it was interesting. It's like it caused this positivity to happen because
Yeah.
he doesn't look at it as a negative thing. Now that he's
Yeah.
older, of course, you know, there's levels to that game also, right? How
Right.
kids think. But for a long time, it wasn't negative or positive. It just is what it is. And even
Hmm.
now, it's a lot is what it is. But of course, the older you get, the more questions you have about heaven and what happens. And, he even asked me the other day, he's like, hold on. So when I'm old, none of you guys are going to be here,
Oh my
you
gosh.
know? And I
Yeah.
never lie to him. I never lie to him. If I don't want to answer, I will just say, report back to me in 5 years and I'll give you the answer.
Exactly.
When you're sometimes I'll even say, when you're 44, I'll give you the answer. Um, but I won't lie. He even asked
Hmm.
me, where do babies come from? Stuff like that. I don't
Yeah.
want it.
What a blessing to have had him as you were going through this process of grief, trying to put the pieces together, but also being responsible for another being, at the same
Totally.
time. Those are very different avenues that you have to take care of at the same time. And
Mhm.
it's interesting because trauma and not, trauma can be an overused word, but not in the negative connotation either, but trauma in a sense where you have to stop.
Mhm.
Doesn't matter what trauma that is, that moment where you have to stop and then you look at your life and then you have to reflect and then decide how you're going to move forward. And that particular moment is what really makes you, how you show up in the world.
Oh, totally.
And so I can imagine that shifted everything for you greatly.
Yes.
And all the work that you were involved in, and I'm thinking, New York, some of Wall Street is that kind of cutthroat business, right?
Absolutely.
That really, those are some of the areas where you really need to be strong within yourself. How do you transition this now with everything that's happened to you to including spirituality and mindfulness into that?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I always say life is a mirror, and that's pretty much what you just said without using the word mirror. And it's very true. And then the other thing is, I kind of look at it, I love metaphors. I kind of look at you have two sons and you have a father that's out an alcoholic. Why does one son say, I'm never going to drink again, and the other son becomes an
Mm,
alcoholic? They're in the same house, they're in the same environment. So there is something about that where, you could look in the mirror and you could say, screw it, this is what it is. Or you could look in the mirror and say, okay, I'm gonna be better because of it. I'm gonna use this as fuel. I'm going to
mhm,
use this fear or this trauma or whatever word you want to say as a fuel to go and propel. And that doesn't mean that you don't have those negative emotions, negative feelings, or whatever waves you want to talk about. But it
mhm,
does mean that, hey, I want to keep moving, right? Like, I don't like these phrases, move on, move forward,
mhm,
but you do want to keep moving. I mean, we're still in the 3D. I remember I was supposed to buy a house in Florida, and I should have bought it. But I remember clearly someone, I don't remember who it was, but I do remember clearly someone saying, "Well, why would you want to buy that house? You were supposed to move into that house with Devora and Max, and it was
mhm.
supposed to be your house. Why would you still want to buy it?" And I said, "Well, do you believe that there's more to this world? Do you believe like she's in heaven?" And they said yes. And I'm like, "So what part of you thinks that she would want Max and I to be homeless?"
Right.
So
Exactly.
it's like common sense is not that common.
Mhm,
So people think sometimes. And then to answer the other question with the cutthroatness,
mhm,
it is. Listen, it is. And to move forward, listen, I always was somewhat religious, somewhat spiritual. Devora and I went to Sedona, Arizona,
mm,
over COVID, had an amazing, amazing time. I recommend it to everyone. And so it just knowing that there's more out there, right? Like we
mhm,
know this. If when we look at science and we look at like how much we can see, how much we can hear. We know that we can't hear dog whistles, right? We can agree on certain things. I know it's hard to agree on stuff these days, but we can agree that you can't hear a dog whistle. I would hope we can all get on that bandwagon. And so it's still sound, it's still there. Just because you can't hear it doesn't mean it's not there. Just because you can't see it doesn't mean it's not there. So we know there's stuff. And what's interesting about real estate, obviously it's a business, but you've heard this line a million times. It's going to hit you a little different. How many
mhm.
times do you hear someone, I walked into this place and I just got such a good feeling.
Yeah.
But most business decisions is not like that. There's this feeling spiritual aspect of moving into, I mean, people, even rentals, right? Oh, I don't want to live there. It just feels very dense, or it feels
Mhm,
like a prison or whatever it might be. But then you go into another place and you're like, I could see myself living here. Like these are lines you hear all the time. And so
mhm.
there is something there.
Yeah. I wonder too if some of that cutthroat feeling that we were talking about, because these areas require this certain strength and resilience, do you feel there's a stigma that it requires you to be hard? It requires you to be brunt, to get anywhere. How do you feel in your experience? Is that truly necessary? Is there a way that we could do it differently?
So it's interesting because when you speak with people or watch TV or the news or whatever it might be, people will tell you being a psychopath is bad. And people will say being a sociopath is bad. But we live in a society that rewards those two
Mm,
things.
mhm,
So, and also you could say this about surgeons, certain kinds of doctors. But listen, there's stats. I think it's like 25% of CEOs in New York, 25% of surgeons, give or take a couple of points, are sociopaths, are psychopaths. And if you think about like Dexter, for example, right? He's like a good serial killer. I don't know if you've watched that show. It's a great one. But you know,
I have to look into
but if you
that.
think about it, let's say you're born with this thing that you want to be a serial killer, but you're a good enough person to know you don't want to kill people. So some of those people become surgeons. They're not killing people, they're saving
Hmm.
people, but it's
Right.
giving them that thing. And so to
Interesting.
answer the question, listen, to be at a certain level of this game, you have to be really ruthless. And that's why many people aren't there. So when you think of an older movie and you think of like a really strong father figure, you
Hmm.
know, they're ruthless, you know,
Hmm.
to come in and fire 10,000 people. You have to be a certain person. You know, you're not going to be
Hmm.
listening to drama. Now, on the flip side of that, if you're too
Hmm.
good of a person and you have a small business and your employee Bobby keeps coming in and keeps telling you, "Oh, I have this problem. Oh, can you pay me now? I know I'm supposed to get paid on Friday, but can you pay me on Tuesday? My cat just died. My car broke down. My kid is sick." That person does need to be fired because that person's a drain. So
Hmm.
there's these spectrums, and it's not so clear cut. But I know for me, I would fire Bobby, and I wouldn't be ruthless like that. I'm somewhere in the middle. What can I tell you?
So, Helen, you mentioned like this idea of safety and I'm just so grateful to be here and listen to Bryan and even the two of you, exchange back and forth. Bri, like we talk about a lot this energy of the divine masculine and the feminine and the balance in between. And I think that is there a standout, scenario for you, Bri, because I see Bryan as my safe space because he is a true divine masculine who happens to be an alpha, but is also very attuned in his feminine and curated. His sensitivities are his gifts, his rawness and the masculine, like Bryan is both. Bri, do you have like one standout incident, that helped you kind of get there on your path? And then maybe
Hmm.
next time we'll have Max come with you because Helen, his son, is also a natural divine masculine. He's 6, and when he's in the car with you as a woman, you feel safe and he's a 6-year-old. I'm not kidding.
Oh,
Like a
it's
spirit
amazing.
thing that they both have. So,
Hmm.
Brian, are there standouts for you, like personal life and business story that maybe got you here?
Totally.
Hmm.
I think I've always been highly sensitive. I think that
Hmm.
it could be a trauma response, it could be a coping mechanism, but sometimes empaths are just it's just another trauma response, right? Sometimes it's
Hmm.
not necessarily what you think an empath is. And sometimes people are real empaths and people think they're magical. They just can feel things that aren't there, just like the dog whistle can hear things that aren't there. So for me, I don't have a specific moment, but there have been many moments in my life where I use my sensitivity for good. And, when I feel myself feeling like someone's trying to make me feel guilty or someone's trying to make me feel a negative emotion, I know that they're trying to manipulate because as a highly sensitive person, you are on the bullseye of getting manipulated. And so you need to know when these manipulations are happening. And once you see the magic trick, you're not going to fall for the woman getting cut in half. And so
And
you
Brian, would
really
you say you love calling those people out immediately?
Yeah, I usually do. I usually do. It depends on the situation, but I can feel it right away. And that's why I think it's so important. Like people have these feelings. Like the
Hmm.
same feeling I get when someone's trying to manipulate me is the same feeling someone else is getting when they're manipulating. But I have a name for it, which is called manipulation, and they don't. So they're just like,
Hmm.
oh, this person's making me feel guilty, so I got to do what they say. And
Hmm.
so when you name certain things, and you can name it your friends, you can name it Johnny, Frank, and Jimmy. That's okay. You don't have to call it anxiety and depression. But if
Right.
you name it, you can kind of work with it and be like, okay, this is Jimmy here. This is what's going on here. And so it's very, very important when you are sensitive. And also, like, look, what happened with Devora, you're also like kind of on a bullseye of people trying to take advantage, right? Like
Hmm. Hmm.
mediums, for example. And, there are people that are malicious and there are people that aren't. There's people that are sensitive that can really like sense auras and sense people, but then there's people that are having a full-blown conversation. And, I like to say if you speak to God, you're religious. If God speaks to you, you're crazy.
So, Brian, you think that you're part of your healing journey? Do you think that that got you to this place? you know, we talk about your spirituality and your business mastery, like bridging the two.
Yeah.
Say that that happening to you was like a dive in deeper for you to get to the skill sets that you have now.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I was doing a lot of business consulting with my mentor, Marshall Wilkinson. And when all these kind of things happen, it was it's like I would read about these and see, I've been trained by the best hypnotists in the country. I've been trained by the best shamans in the country, breathwork people. And it's like, when you see it, you're like, I didn't realize that that had a name, but I know what you're doing. Or
Hmm.
I don't know what you're doing, but that's cool. And I get the concept, but I didn't know that that was a thing. So, and like, look, Tony Robbins is a great example, right? Like, Tony Robbins is the GOAT. He's the best of the best. He doesn't really come out and say, hey, I'm an NLP specialist. He just speaks, but he is an NLP specialist, you know? And so for him, he decided a long time ago, I'm not going to say, he does say it once in a blue moon, but he's not going to say, hey, I'm Tony Robbins, the king of NLP. He just says, I'm Tony Robbins. And when he speaks to people as like a business consultant, especially for like the broad audience, broad public, he's not really like going in your accounting books. He's talking about your identity and he's talking about how to shift that identity. So
Hmm.
he's not telling you how much to charge your client, but he's saying, you know, if you were where you want to be, how much would you charge your client?
Yeah, Bri,
Right.
that's something that I want to share and make sure that we touch on too is like Bri has both. So like Bri, will you touch on, you know, your closer? I call him the closer. Like there's a cutthroat blend of that where what would you say to someone who was like, I'm really struggling with asking for $40,000? You know,
Hmm.
Brian, help me because I want to get $40,000 and teach breath work at like a university. You
Yeah,
know, how would you help them
totally.
go into that interview and that
Hmm.
pitch?
Like shift the
So
mindset. Hmm.
Yeah.
yeah. So like four words come to mind. By the way, when I'm looking down, I'm just taking notes. But four words come to mind. Number one, conviction. You have
Hmm.
to have conviction. Okay. Don't think about it like what the scenario you just said is perfect, but let's put that on the side. Let's think about it as a new restaurant. A new restaurant pops up in your area. You go there. The owner comes out. It's like actually like what a restaurant should be. The owner comes out and says hello. He gives you a Frangelico shot at the end. The food is fantastic. The server's fantastic. Everyone says hello. Everyone says goodbye. You know, you actually have food to take home with you to heat up tomorrow, and you're full. And it's like you speak to your friend and you're like, you gotta go to this restaurant. You just
Hmm.
have to. There's no way you can live another day without going to this restaurant. Have you ever felt like that?
Yes, for
Now,
sure.
when that person goes to the restaurant, are they going to pay for the meal or are they going to expect to get it for free? That's
They're expecting to pay like
right.
everyone else. Yeah.
And then the next thing is courage, right? Like a lot of people want to say fake it till you make it, act as if whatever the other one is I can't think of.
Live into the future like it's already happening now. That one.
Right. And so it's not that
Mhm.
those things are completely wrong. It's that when you put them in a vacuum, maybe they're wrong. But like
Mhm.
the idea, there is something there. And that's why people hold on to it. Like it's not totally false. But the thing is,
Mhm.
the word that people are looking for is courage. So there's a
Mhm.
difference between me saying that I am a Pilates instructor, right? Or a yoga instructor like Heather is, and I'm just going to fake it till I make it and I'm going to teach a class, but I don't know what the hell I'm doing. That's just called fraud. That's called Leonardo DiCaprio in Catch Me If You Can. But now, if you are very good at Pilates and you're very good at yoga like Heather, and but you need to get to that next level, you want to get to that next level, there's a desire to get to that next level. Well, that's a mind shift. That's what really like fake it till you make it or act as if. It's like it's not that you don't have the skill set, you need the skill set, and then you can go to the next level, and you need the courage to go to the next level. So I've replaced all that stuff with courage. And so you
Mhm.
need the courage to ask. You
Mhm.
need the courage to ask, and you might get turned down. You know what I'm saying? I think that people put a lot of that as rejection. I think a lot of it is compatibility. And I think that with rejection, focus on the people that say yes. You're not
Mhm.
marrying the girl that says no, you're marrying the girl that says yes. Focus
Brian,
on the yes.
Brian, do you go through like a session with someone? Like you have like a rigmarole of like, hey, so I want to ask for this 40 grand for my breath work, but, and then you get them out of the like
Sure.
tentative place.
Yeah, I could
Because I
see
will
that.
say too, I gotta say, like the energy transference, like Brian, are there things that you do? Do you do push-ups? Do you go to the gym? Brian is also a medicine man. His cabinet is full. He's
Hmm.
dialed, he's curated.
Yeah.
What's
I,
some
I,
of your magic
I
for
definitely believe in the gym.
Yeah.
100% I believe in moving. It doesn't have to be the gym. I believe in moving. Like we have this body. It's like we spoke about before the show started, right? Like
Hmm.
5D is awesome. 4D is
Yeah.
awesome. But I have a bill coming up.
Yeah.
I can't pay the bill with 4D. So it's
Yeah.
like we have this body, we have this meat suit, like we got to use it. That's
Yeah.
it.
Be
Like
in
we
that.
just have to. Like sitting on the couch and manifesting a six-pack abs probably not going to work,
Got
you
to put the
know?
work in it. Brian, what you were sharing earlier, we basically, even, talking to you now, looking back at our conversation, honestly, to do well in business these days, it requires mindfulness.
Yes.
We've been looking at it separately, but everything that you're sharing is about looking at yourself, understanding your belief systems that you thought were something that are not. What are the things that are holding you back? And really changing that mindset and especially what we think business is. It's
Yeah.
really the one thing. And it's interesting that the people that are in spirituality, mindfulness, wellness field are the ones that struggle the most with making business successful, which those are actually the tools that would make someone successful. What would be the thing that holds us back in this area?
So great question. So first of all, with the mindfulness, you got to remember business changes just like everything else changes. And a lot of the things in business, a lot of things in marketing have been around here for over 100 years. This whole idea of limited time only was probably invented by P.T. Barnum in like 1920 or 30, the circus guy. And
Mhm.
it doesn't work anymore. Like if I tell you I only have 3 spots left, okay, so if I pay you 10,000, you're not going to let me in. If I pay you 100K, you're not going to let me in. Of course you will. So it's like, you know, the level of BS, more and more people understand that. So that's why it's changing. And that's why the ads you're getting on Instagram and stuff are changing as well. So for sure, business is changing. What was the other thing? Because it was good. Like the mindset that has to change, right?
Yes.
Um, it's all
Brian, why can't healers close?
Yeah,
it's
basically.
I think it's a lot about conviction, self-love, and knowing they're worth it. They really, it's really a
Mhm.
worthiness issue.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean that you can't do things for free. It doesn't mean that you can't do things pro bono. And it doesn't mean you can't be a good person. But you can't, and I mean it, you can't say, I want to be able to donate $10 million to feed these kids and build a school and do all these things, but I also only want to charge $1.99.
Right.
The way to do it is like Oprah, who I'm not like the biggest Oprah fan, but I also have no issue with her.
Yeah,
Like
with her
Oprah
system.
is like she's a monster closer. Let's be honest here. She's a shark. She made all this money, and now you get a car, and you get a car, and you get a car. If she was charging $10, she wouldn't be giving away cars. So
Right.
sometimes your audience has to shift. Like I've met a lot of female, usually spiritual people. They want to help women that are having problems, right?
Hmm.
Financially or whatever. That's amazing. But think about how much you could help them if you were charging $40,000 to this group of people that can
Right.
actually afford it. And now
Yeah.
you have $500,000 in your bank
To
account. Think
spare.
about how much you could actually help those women now. Instead of now you're going to them, you're giving them a piece of bread and a cup of tea, and it's not doing anything. This is an interesting one. Imagine like a coin. And imagine on one side of the coin you have faith. And imagine on the other side of the coin you have doubt. They're both things that haven't taken place yet. They're both living in the
Mhm.
future. So why do most people lean on the side of doubt? Because they're getting preparation wrong. If you remember Noah's Ark, he didn't say, "Oh, God's here, so I'm going to survive the flood. He said, no, I'm going to listen to God and prepare and build this massive ark so I could survive the flood.
Mhm.
And so you can still be in faith and still build the ark. And so people get that confused. Like, but if you're walking around worried and doubtful, like the best question to ask is, how would you act if you knew 1000% that you were going to be the next best blank?
Mhm.
If you knew it, and that's all you're seeing, all these people on TV, they just know it. They just know it.
Mhm.
They exude it. And, you know,
That
the
conviction, as you said, and
conviction.
courage.
Yeah. And you know what?
Yeah.
If you, if you don't have as much conviction as you want, just up your courage. That's it. You know what I'm saying? You can go, but I think that like one of the things is speaking directly to the main person. Like when you're doing social media or you're doing these things, like actually speak to who you're speaking to. The other people don't matter. Listen,
Yeah.
Jesus Christ had to leave his hometown to do business and get customers. You,
Yep.
you know what I'm saying? Like
Mhm.
chances are the guy on Facebook that you went to high school with, he's not going to be a client of yours. Maybe he will be, but it's most likely going to be you're going to have to achieve a certain level of success or a certain level of something, and then those people are going to want. But
Mhm.
chances are they're not going to be your first clients. Chances are strangers are going to be your first clients.
So, Brian, would
Yeah.
you say like, because we've spoken about this before, like the level of like risk versus reward, is that like a big fear that comes up for people? Is it a fear of failure thing? Like you spoke about worthiness, being fearless. Like what are people so afraid of? Like Brian will help you break through that because he'll call you out, but also you can tell a sense of humor. Where are you at with like risk, reward?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think most successful people they take risks. Most successful people fail multiple times. Um, the
So you're
reward
Michael
is
Jordan,
great.
fall down seven, get up eight.
Exactly.
Mhm.
No one's going to say, "Hey, I'm going skiing for the first time. I hope I don't fall down."
Mhm.
So we have to prepare for that. We have to understand, but risk is super, super important, right? We have to be willing to put ourselves out there. There's no question about that.
The story you shared earlier about the father that's an alcoholic with two children, one becomes, he never drinks again, one becomes an alcoholic. I really wonder, most people will say, well, you have a choice, right? But
Hmm.
being from your experience and coaching and working with others, we can change that. Do you feel we can bring someone back from the other side towards seeing the trauma in a different light? And that's why it is important, because I know this idea of coaching, it's a very, very popular these days, and,
Yeah,
every single person's a coach. But truly having someone to coach you through a life scenario like that and break you free from that mindset that tells you that you're locked in to that story, that difference between the one who follows in the father's footsteps
yeah,
and the one who steps out. Also, to take that stigma away from getting the help,
right.
getting a coach. There's
Yeah.
nothing wrong with taking that assistance to get you to that next level. And what does it say about you? What would you say to those who either have thought about it, never made that step, or think that's not something they should do as if it reflects badly on them?
So many things to unpack. I love every one of them. As far as getting a coach, every single person that is massively successful has a coach. Michael Jordan had a coach. Michael Phelps had a coach. Rocky had a coach. Rocky's coach wasn't massive. Rocky's coach was Mickey, right? So like when people say like, "Oh, I don't need a coach or I don't want a coach," then how come all these other people that are massively successful, like the guy that you tell all your friends you love, you say you like love Michael Jordan, you're literally wearing Jordans right now, but he has a coach. So
Mhm.
at every level you can have a coach. So that's number one. Number two, I like long term, like
Mhm.
keeping there, meaning a lot of things that are going on, and I've done it all, and I'm a fan of it. But hypnosis, breath
Mhm.
work, visualization, sometimes it's amazing. I think it's a piece of the puzzle. I don't think it's the whole puzzle because so many people are like, "Hey, I went back to default." right?
Mm-hmm.
Or I had temporary relief, but now I feel the same way again. So I like to work with the nervous system. And
I know.
so you think about this. If a child, you've heard this a million times, if a child touches a hot stove and they get burnt, they don't touch it again because of your nervous system. It's immediate. If anyone has ever jumped into a pool or the beach and they forgot that their cell phone was in their pocket, trust me, the next time they jump in, they're going to pat themselves down like they're in the airport.
Mm-hmm.
So
Not
there's
happening
something that
again.
changes instantly. So how do we do that for other things? For example, the alcohol or other stuff. And so with the alcohol thing, and that could be alcohol, drugs, whatever,
Right.
you gotta remember that's the solution. That's not the problem.
Right.
So people walk around saying like that guy has a drinking problem, that guy has a gambling problem. No, no, no. He has a gambling solution. He has a drinking solution. He doesn't have a
Mm-hmm.
drinking problem. What is the problem? And it's probably also childhood, self-love, and I do say this to a lot of people, listen, when you were less than whatever, 10, maybe even less than 15, it was probably your parents' fault. But now you're a grown person, and now it's actually you have to take responsibility. Like, yes, your dad shouldn't have beat you, your mom should have hugged you, you shouldn't have been fed Snickers bars for dinner. But the fact that you're eating a Snickers bar right now, shame on you.
That's
Shame
you.
on you, because you
Mm-hmm.
can go to Google, you can go to YouTube, and you could find out. So if you're 20, 30, 40, 70, 100 years old and still blaming mommy, shame on you. Now, that doesn't mean that we can't fix it. That doesn't mean we can't get to the next level, but you have to come to that conclusion.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, you know what? Shame on me. And I am using that specifically. And that shame will be like, okay, let me clear it.
The
Let's get it
catalyst too.
out.
Yeah.
Let's get it
Mm-hmm.
out, because there's nothing wrong with it. It's living in this idea that I'm going to hide it, right? That's what we all talk about. Like, it's in the closet, it's hidden. But reality is that guy who's drinking, he's drinking for probably something that happened as a kid.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have to figure out why, and we have to go through some limiting beliefs, of course, fear of failure,
Mm-hmm.
fear of success, and just we have to put them on the right narrative, the right track.
Bryan, there's so much more that we can continue to talk about. So I really hope that we can bring you back on because there's so many more questions that we'd like to ask.
Totally.
So I'd love to have you back. And again, oh, Heather, thank you for introducing me to Bryan and for welcoming Bryan on the show.
Yeah, thanks for saying yes, both of you, and connecting today. Appreciate you guys.